Welcome to the F50 Woman Podcast, dedicated to sharing stories from a diverse community of women in order to provoke you into a passionate pursuit of life, build unshakable character, and achieve extraordinary things. Now, here is your host, Julia Jack.
As a young girl, she always had a passion for education and helping people. But how did she end up studying economics? Find out about that and more from this once teacher, then graduate in economics, and then teacher again. Shellonee goes about everything she does with a full heart and a deep desire to change the world. You will be filled with wisdom to grow on when you listen to this chat with soon-to-be Dr. Shellonnee Chinn Whitehead, another F50 woman. Hey, welcome to the F50 Woman Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We are here today with Shellonee Chinn. She is a mom. She is a wife. She is an educator. She is a professional and a soon-to-be doctor. And hopefully we'll hear a lot more about that as we go along. Welcome, Shellonee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Julia, for having me. I feel so honored to be on your podcast with your followers and these other fabulous 50 women who are trying to live the best versions of themselves. I just think it's amazing work that you're doing. And, I'm just so honored to be here.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do, we want to get to know you. We want to get to know what you do, but I really love to know you first. It really informs what we do and to learn what you've been through and how you got to where you are. So please tell us about Shellonee as a little girl. Who was she? What did she want to do?
A little girl, you want me to go back that far?
Go back as far as you feel is relevant. Go from where you feel like there's a relevant discussion or something you want to share.
Well, when I think about my childhood, I realize now, being 50, how all of your experiences, as far as you can remember, create who you are, because those are your lived experiences. Even though they're like in these different buckets, they all create who we are, right? So I have to reflect back on my childhood because I am an educator. And so I'm a mother. I have 3 daughters who are now 28, 27, and 25.
Okay.
A granddaughter and a new grandson. So, when you think about your life and your childhood, you just want to make sure that you're being the best version of yourself as a mom and then now a grandmother. And that doesn't happen by chance, right? You have to go through things and look at what other people did and say, how am I going to do it differently? So some of my fondest memories of growing up are my first educational experience. And I'd like to say, I think I was educated in every possible environment you could be involved and educated in.
Okay.
And my fond memories are when, from the age of 4 to the 5th grade, I didn't do the HBCU at the back end, but I did it at the front end, right?
Okay.
So I went to a school called Build Academy. And I didn't know what a gym that school was, but I didn't know that. And I have to say that to your audience members, I talk a lot about being a Black female, a lot, because that really defines who I am. There's that intersectionality between those two that I can't ever get away from. So I use that when I'm actually talking a lot. So, I just want to say that to the audience because I don't know who might be listening, but I definitely want to put that out there that is who I am.
Right.
And so as a little girl, not knowing that, I thought all teachers looked like me. And I thought all my classmates looked like me. I mean, they all did. So I knew the world from that frame. So our curriculum reflected us, our activities, our plays, everything. We did Broadway plays that had to do with Black experience. I mean, we did The Wiz, like not The Wizard of Oz, but The Wiz, even at that young age, right? And so it was just a lot of self-pride in my foundational years,
Okay.
I didn't know about the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't know anything about the Star Spangled Banner. Like
Okay.
we sang the Negro National Anthem every assembly, and the bandera, the red, black, and green flag, that was all we knew. So
Wow.
it was a very sheltered and supportive and loving environment. And I mean, you just really felt that the world evolved around you at that point. And so after the fifth grade, my parents decided to move my brother and I. We went to a Catholic school, but it was still the same, pretty much. All my classmates were of color. And I would say 99% of them were,
Okay.
even though we had Black and white teachers.
Okay.
But all of my classmates were like really smart kids. Right. And that's how I thought. I just thought that, I think some of us were smarter than the others, and some of those were definitely smarter than me. But you didn't know that. It was just a very nurturing environment.
Okay.
And then my world got disrupted.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. So, of course, I was living in the city at the time, the city of Buffalo. And my father decided that, I guess it was a joint endeavor. My parents decided to move us to the suburbs.
Okay.
So at that time, I was probably around 15 years old, right?
Okay.
Well, it was around the 8th grade.
Okay.
That was when they moved us to the suburbs. And like I said, I'm walking around and looking at my peers, and they all look like me. And then I go to a school, and it was, I would say, 2,500 students in my class, 8th grade class. It might have been 269, and there were 2 Blacks. Yeah. And my girlfriend was so light, she could probably
that was
not
almost irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, she could pass. And she had been in that school environment for her whole life. And I was new. And Julia, I could tell you the first day of class, I was like in shock.
I can imagine.
So I went to the bathroom, and I forgot that I was Black for a minute. Like I was like, oh my God, like I scared myself. Like,
oh,
because I'm looking at the sea of white.
Yeah.
So that was a very disruptive experience, especially back then, even though we lived in a great subdivision, beautiful home. School was an extension of my home life, because I had left all my friends and things like that. Yeah. So I was in the suburbs, and it was a really great education, but I couldn't embrace it because socially, emotionally, I was so deprived.
Yeah.
Right. So even as an elementary student, I really didn't know I was smart until I looked at my report cards like years later, because everything was affected by those grades, because I just couldn't connect, not involved in anything. And your parents, God bless my parents, they just thought, they were doing the right thing, which in some ways they were. My parents were very young when they got married, and they're still married now. They were 21 and 19 years old. And I think they did a phenomenal job with my brothers and I. But that piece right there, they wouldn't have known. Yeah. They wouldn't have known how traumatic that experience was for me. Yeah. Especially when you go to school and you're dealing with racism all day. And then you go back to your neighborhood, and I was never invited to one friend's home, not one. And I never had anyone come to my house. So it was a very isolating experience. Yeah. And at that time, we had a lot of racial things going on in the city. But I think I probably was called the N-word probably like 3 or 4 times a week. So it was always trying to self-advocate. And then the thing about it is your teachers didn't have the language to help you, right? Even administrators. So even though we would slip KKK cards, they didn't know what to do with that either. So it was like more of a survival environment than an environment where, you could really embrace the educational experience. But reflecting back, it really was. Academically, it was a great choice, right?
Okay. But to go to that school, to go to that suburban school.
It was a good choice. I mean, I can't think of, it was a good choice academically, even though there was the erasure of Black people in the textbooks and experiences like that. But, as a parent, I know that you can supplement that if it's not there, right? Yeah. As an educator, I know that. But it just was a very traumatic experience. So then I ended up going to college. And it was so funny because from the time I was in elementary school, especially at my baby HBCU that I call it, I always wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be an educator from as far as I can remember. So I educated in the classroom. Wow. I played school in the classroom. I played school at home. But then when it was time for me to go to college, I was dissuaded from being an educator. Like, no, you can't do that. Really? Because at that time, there weren't a lot of teaching positions. Okay. So I was told I couldn't do that. I had to major in like business. I was like, no, I want to do social work. So when you ask me about me as a young person, I always knew I had a passion for helping people.
Okay.
And I had a passion for education. So I never swayed from that, even though I ended up majoring in economics.
Okay.
The worst. I was like, what?
Yes.
Why am I? And it's
Yeah,
so funny.
square peg, round hole. This is not really
Oh
working.
my
Yeah.
gosh. But it's so funny. I would literally was going around campus asking people what their major was and did they think that would be a good fit for me?
Wow. Okay.
Because I had no idea. Because other than being a teacher, I had no other, I didn't want to do anything else. I
Yeah.
was never connected to anything else.
Yeah.
So it's so funny, in the movie The Soul Food, and you know how the one sister, she was in college and they were sitting around the table and they would asking her what her major was.
Yeah.
And then they were laughing. They asked the boyfriend, like, what's your major? And he was like, a lawyer. And they was like, okay, I guess you're majoring in law right now.
Yeah.
And that was me. My boyfriend was economics major. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Hey, we could study together. And that's why I became an economics
Oh
major.
gosh.
I know.
Talk about
But
knowing and nobody sending you in the path that you already know you're supposed to walk in. Okay. Yeah.
exactly. So that already would be how I know that it's so important to do what you really want to do.
Yes. Yeah.
So that, but I've always been very headstrong and very flighty. Like when I make up my mind to do something, it's just, but but as a young adult, you can only do what people allow you to do if you want to be respectful to your
Yes.
elders, right?
Right.
So then I'm like, okay, well, they're paying for this. You got to kind of do what they want you
Yeah,
to
I'll do
do
that
back
then.
then.
Yeah.
Right. But when I graduated, I said, I am out of here. I'm going to live my life and do what I want to do. And so after I graduated in I got my brother. Actually, what happened was I went to Washington, D.C., and I went to the homecoming at Howard.
Okay.
That was
HU.
HU, right? Because my brother was a freshman.
Yeah.
So then I made up my mind, Julia, that October I went for homecoming. When I came back, I had a whole paradigm shift. I was like, there's no way I'm coming back to the city. I'm not staying here. I'm leaving because there's a big world out there and I'm not going to stay here.
Okay.
And plus I knew I needed to actually stretch myself and get beyond what people thought that I should be and what they thought I should do. Okay. So I just leaped out on faith. I think I know I only had $200 in my pocket.
Okay.
And 2 outfits. And when my brother was going back to school as a sophomore, I was riding shotgun. Wow. I was in the passenger seat.
Okay.
They tried everything to get me to stay. I was like, nope, I'm leaving. If I don't have a job in 2 weeks, I'll be back home because I was going to run out of money because I knew exactly how much I needed to go down 16th Street to ride the 16th Street bus because my girlfriend lived by Meridian, you know.
Yes.
And I said, I need to ride that bus every day. This is how much. And I know I can eat tuna fish salad every day. So I had made a plan.
Okay.
And I was going to find a job. And I found 2.
Wow. Okay. What were you doing? What did you find the jobs doing?
Well, one job, it was like really a customer service job. It was, I worked for a nonprofit. And then I end up getting a job. And I had, some of my friends, that were there that I was staying with, when you are in a situation where people don't, and I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just saying that people don't, they only know what they know, right?
Yeah.
So no one could say, you can do this and you'll be great at this, right?
Yeah.
So I opened up the one ads because at that time you had newspapers, right?
Yes. Newspapers, look that up.
So
you have to Google it now. Yeah.
My girlfriend, Maggie, says, oh, MCI is hiring. And so that was one of the first telecom companies that came on the scene after AT&T, after deregulation in 1987. So they opened up their own. That was where the headquarters was in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So then I was like, oh, you think I should go apply for the job? And she said, and I had been working for a temporary agency. And that lady at the temporary agency tried to talked me out of going for the
Hmm.
interview because of course they make money when you work for a temp agency, right?
Yes.
But in my mind, I knew, well, I came here, I need to find a job and
Mhm.
they're hiring. So I don't care what they did in Virginia where they laid people off. They're hiring over here today
Yeah.
and I need to
I
eat.
need this job. Yeah.
I need this job or I'm going back to that place. So I went for the interview. I embellished my resume because I really didn't have any job experience, right?
Okay.
And I told them I sold all this stuff because I did sell. My aunt sold Avon, so I'm like, I sell Avon too because I'm sitting there next to her,
Okay.
right? And my dad
Okay.
sold Shackley. I'm like, I could sell anything. What? I can do it, and I can read, and I know I can do this.
Yeah.
So I did. I landed that job. I started part time, and then in the course of 5 years, I had 4 promotions.
Wow.
So it was really great. And
Yeah.
then, but in that situation, I realized it was not a good fit for me.
Okay.
Like business, the corporate world, just it went against the grain of who I was. And it
Okay.
was interesting because I had a team of women that worked for me, 14 women. And at the time I was like 24 years old, right?
Okay.
I was really young, but I was a supervisor and then I ended up being a supervisor trainer.
Hmm.
But I had a team of 14 women and often they would say, you would be a great teacher. And I would just laugh.
Okay.
And I said, really?
Yeah.
I am not going back to college because it was painful for me.
Yeah.
It was so painful to think about going back to college.
Yeah. After that
How
first
could I possibly
experience.
go
Yeah.
back and do a redo?
Yeah.
And this was just so painful. I'm like, oh gosh, I would never do that. Never.
Yeah.
So what do I say to your audience? Never
Never
say
say
never.
never. I'm with you.
So right, because I'm like 3 degrees past the first one right now, right?
Yeah. So that's
Yes.
perfect. That's a perfect transition because I don't want you
Hmm.
to, I want to leave some of that meat in the middle for after. So what do you do now?
Wow.
Tell us about you
It
now,
took
not
me a
only
long
what you do, but who you are. Tell us about you.
it took me a while to get to where I am, right?
Okay.
Because a lot of transitions,
Okay.
Um, after working for WorldCom, I was still in DC and I got married,
Okay.
right? Got married, knew that I wanted to give her, always wanted to have children.
Hmm.
So I did get married. I stayed in DC for a little bit of time after that, but then I wanted my children I knew I had some health challenges.
Okay.
So I knew I needed to have my children and have them quickly.
Okay.
So I did. I had 3 daughters in 3 years, right?
Wow.
I
Go.
have a 92-year-old, 92 baby, a 94 and a 95 baby, right?
Okay.
So, and it's so interesting though, because when I look at life, I'm like, you have to think positively, you have to think about what you want, and you
Mhm.
have to really speak it. And I knew that once I had the one daughter, I'm like, let's just do this let's just do this girl thing, right? Let's
Okay.
not mess up. I was happy with, I was like, okay, let's just do the girl thing, stay in the same department. And I didn't have any sisters. So that was like really God's
Yeah.
way of really blessing me with the desires of my heart.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
had the 3 daughters, and then we ended up moving back to Buffalo. But
Mhm.
I must say that I was in an abusive relationship. So I am a domestic violence survivor, right? I
Okay.
don't know if you knew
I
that,
did not know
right?
that.
Yes.
Mm-mm.
I was married for 16 years in the same home, with
Right.
him, but 19 years married,
Okay.
between marriage and a divorce. And
Mhm.
it was so painful. It was so painful
Yeah.
because how do you love someone and everyone around you saying, but he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He works, he's brilliant, gregarious, smart, and he
Yeah.
really was. But sometimes you don't see everything you need to see, or
Yeah.
some things progress in a way where it's bigger than you.
Yeah.
So I had to dig deep, get a lot of support outside of my family
Okay.
because sometimes people can't help you in situations
Yeah.
because they are not all knowing, and emotional and mental abuse looks a lot different than physical,
Yeah. Can't see
right?
it.
And
Yeah.
right, you can't see it. There are no scars, no bruises, and I find that the more educated we are,
Mhm.
we're more targets for abuse. Like because we don't recognize it, we think we can work through it or we can get through it because we're like these women who we can do all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So at one point I called the domestic violence hotline and I said, I need help.
Yeah.
And they informed me when I called that, especially knowing my background, coming from a 2-parent household, both my grandparents, 2 sets of maternal and maternal grandparents, both still being married. They said, sometimes you're the worst type of victim.
Really? Why?
Because you're educated, because you are an achiever, right?
Okay.
So you're not going to quit. You're going to like stay in there and try to fix
Fix
it
it.
and
Use the
make it
logic.
better.
Yeah.
You,
I could see that.
like,
Yeah.
I could do this.
Mhm.
I can do this. And
Yeah.
especially being a woman of faith, you think that if I can pray through it, and because, we're taught that that's your husband, like that band around the family, fatherhood, the hood
Yeah.
over the family. So we're in that. And it was such a stigma for me. There's no way I want to be a divorced woman. Like,
Yeah.
I did not get married to get divorced.
Yeah.
So I stayed pretty much as long as I could until I knew it was detrimental to my health.
Okay.
And then after I was with one therapist, he was like, you have to leave because I'm worried about you.
Oh, okay.
Like, he was worried about my life, my mental state,
Wow.
what I might do,
Okay.
not wanting to face being divorced.
Yeah.
And yet knowing that's where it was going. And I really, there was nothing else I could do.
Okay.
And, you don't want your children to be in a single parent household. But because I knew that it was a downturn, I knew it was changing, and I was a stay-at-home mom at that time.
Okay.
I knew I needed a plan B. So I sat down and I said, what am I going to do?
Mhm.
I knew I didn't want to go back to corporate. I knew that my parents were too young to watch my children, right? So I needed to be able to do something. And what falls into that category? You have your weekends off.
I'm not going to say it. The one thing you should have been doing
What
long
do I
time
start
ago.
doing?
Yeah. Yes.
I became a teacher. And I taught kindergarten for 15 years. And when you go to work every day, and every day is a Friday. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I had one Monday for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
then my daughters were able to go there, and I actually taught in a private school.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked me where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that private school got me through the divorce, right? Because when you're teaching kindergartners, you have to leave everything in the trunk.
Yes.
No matter what you're going through, you can't bring that in the classroom because you know what, this is your first experience, and everybody loves to be in kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
They skip into school every day. So I skipped into school too. I absolutely love it. It was my dream, teaching little people.
Mm-hmm.
And I love I love the minds of children who have not been tampered with, and they're like a blank computer, and you're programming them.
Yeah.
So I love that aspect of teaching kindergarten. So that's what I did. And then I had a major disruption because I had a new boss that came in. Because at my school, I taught at a private school here in Buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the only African-American classroom teacher that they had ever hired in 127 years. Hmm. And I navigated.
You have to have a moment of silence for that one. Yeah. Really.
And I navigated through that field. I wouldn't say seamlessly.
Okay.
But I had great leadership.
Okay.
And she was a great ally. She was a white middle-aged woman at the time. And she knew who I was in the classroom with. She knew what that environment was, a very privileged environment, right? Because the tuition was like $20,000 a child.
Wow.
But I navigated because I felt like I was protected because of the administration that I had. Mm-hmm. And then I had a major disruption with a new administrator who came in because the lady had retired. So she came in and it changed my life. Okay. It changed my life being a Black female in that space with a younger female who I'm not in her head. Yeah. But I was not the person that they wanted to be there anymore. Okay. So it became a racially animus environment for me. It was very abusive. And it's so interesting because being this Black woman in the skin, I hadn't changed, right? I was the same person I had been. Yep. But once people are emboldened to be who they really are, that's who you start to see.
Wow. It was coming from all sides, it sounds like.
You have these great, right. Like you have these great, fine people, right?
Yeah.
But when they're able to be who they really are, that was directed toward me. And it was interesting. I mean, I don't want to get into all of the details of it, but one example I can just tell you, I can tell the listeners, is that when you know who you are,
Yeah.
and when you're on the right side of the truth and justice, you're going to pretty much do what you have to do. And I was like, I sat there, and actually it became almost, it was abusive, and I was going through trauma, but it became because I had allies around me, people that were like helping me get through this tumultuous time.
Yeah.
I began to laugh at them, because then I started thinking about my grandmothers
Yeah.
and what they may have had to endure. Because
Yeah.
both my grandmothers lived to their 90s, so they were able to be there with me for most of my adult life. And so I knew what their struggles were and what they had gone through. And then I thought about people in the generations before me. So it almost became humorous. Like, I'm like, this is nothing compared to what my grandmothers had to go through.
Right.
You're not going to kill me. You're not going to break me. And I still will not be moved by the situation, because I know who I was, right? I knew I was a woman of God, and I knew I was the head and not the tail, right? And I knew that they had a problem. I didn't have a problem.
Right.
So I ended up filing an EEOC complaint.
Okay.
Even after I filed the complaint, they end up barring me from the building. How do you do that, right? But you bar me from the building, but you let me go back and go to the classroom. I mean, I could go on and on and on about what the world could look like when you have poor leadership,
Yeah.
right? So that situation was more traumatic than my divorce.
I bet.
Right? Because remember I said when you're a teacher, you leave everything in the trunk?
Yeah.
But I did that, and that was my safe place,
Yeah.
And I had to I had ended up having all my relationships, not just with my students, but with my colleagues and all the parents and all my legacy that I had at that school. So after that, I ended up filing like 6 complaints. I was a pro se litigant, and I went to federal court, and I had a lot of technical assistance, but I can tell you that it was the most liberating.
Really? Okay. I wasn't expecting to hear that. Okay.
Oh, it was very liberating, because sometimes the victory is in the fight.
Okay.
And I knew people, because of what I found is that after that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that may have experienced some situations like that, and they don't actually, no one gets to hear their story.
Yeah.
And they suffer in silence.
Yes.
But I didn't. And even though my case did not get to where the merits were heard, I've been able to tell my story through social media.
Yeah.
And create a platform for social justice.
Yeah.
And I had protests and press conferences and things like that. And I think I'm such a better person, a stronger person, because I know that I won.
Okay.
And I won because when you displace someone, and I'm going to give you a metaphor, okay? I'm going to give you an analogy. Like, okay, so what was so traumatic was because I felt as a Black woman, because there had been a white woman who had been fired at the end of the school year prior to that. And they gave her an opportunity to take her classroom down. They had actually fired her, but they enabled her to dismantle her classroom. They left her computers up. They gave her like 2 weeks.
Okay.
But for me, that same rule didn't apply. And were only putting me on leave. They didn't fire me.
Yeah. And you still had no access.
No access, bar you from the building and everything. And I said, this is just like what they would do to us during slavery times. They would separate us from our children because we didn't need to say bye. They could just uproot you. So if that had happened to me and I had never had a chance to voice that or have a platform to communicate that, like I did through social media, Twitter, and Facebook, no one would have ever known that story.
Yeah.
And I would have been able to be an ally and advocate for other women who've been in similar situations. And to me, that was just like, it's so liberating for me to be able to do that. So then fast forward, after 5 or 6 years of fighting and everything, I decided to apply for, because when I had to go back to get my teaching degree, I ended up getting a bachelor's in education and master's, right? Before I went back into the classroom to get the position at the private school. And then I always knew I wanted to get my PhD,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like, oh, no, not yet,
Uh-oh.
not yet. Because you're a single mom. There's only so much you can do, right? When
Yeah.
I say I was a single mom, I literally was a single mom financially, and he kind of
Physically
like
and
just, yeah, everything.
Mhm.
Like I had them 365, like no holidays off
Yeah.
unless, my family was there.
Yeah.
But I had actually taken the LSAT exam because I was going to go to law school because I'm fighting this in this. I said, by the time I finished with the case, I could be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I took that exam and then I said, my gut really says, you really want to go get your PhD because I really wanted to research and I really wanted to work in the areas of Black feminism and critical race theory. And I said, you know what, let me apply. And I took my whole, trunk of everything that I had done and all my experiences and, my scores and everything, and they accepted me into a PhD program. So I just took my comp exam
Mm-hmm.
this past week. So I'm waiting for results. So I can't say I'm ABD yet,
Okay.
but that's in the making. My expected graduation date is 2022. So I'll be
Okay.
Dr. Shellonnee Chinn. This is a lifelong
Congratulations.
dream for me,
Yeah.
but not without trials and
Yeah.
not without different situations that have brought me to this point.
Yeah.
And I actually got married the same week that I started. After being not married for 12 years, I got married the same week I started college,
Okay.
my PhD. And then COVID hit. So I'm like, I like him. I've been in the house with him for a minute. It's pretty
Yeah,
good,
that's a nice way to start off. Yeah, being married. Work together
We
all
got
the
married in
time.
August. We got married in August.
Yeah.
I started school the next week. So
Mm-hmm.
we had September, October, November, December, January, then February, COVID hit, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
mhm,
And then you were home.
then I was home. Then I was
Yeah.
home.
If you are enjoying the F50 Woman podcast, don't forget to share your positive comments and ratings and share us on all your favorite social media channels. F50 Woman is a movement created for women, spread by women. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show and your host, Julia Jack.
Along the way, you talked about friends who helped you when you were getting ready to leave your marriage, but did you have any mentors? Did you seek mentors, whether it's with your professional life or your personal life? Tell us about who helped you along the way, if there was any one particular individual.
That's interesting because I've always had this philosophy that, right, one person can't be your everything, right?
Yes.
And so I realized at a young point in life that I didn't put so much on one person to be even a friend.
Yeah.
I had spiritual friends that would help me and be supportive. And I've always had a spiritual life, even in the midst of going through like the most abusive aspects of that marriage. I never turned away from God.
Yeah.
So Jesus really was like my mentor, right? In the spiritual sense, because I knew I had to trust God through everything.
Mm-hmm.
I have spiritual friends that were there with me. And like I said, I was in the education field. So I had people that I worked with that were like mentors. But I never actually had a specific mentor. But I just had different buckets of situations where I had them for that particular thing.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I have a really strong family. So at that point, they were so very supportive. Once they realized what kind of situation I was in, because emotional and mental abuse can be very deceiving.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to hide.
Yeah.
So once they realized it, I had a lot of support. But I've never really actually had a person that says, I'm your mentor. But what I found is that I've actually been that person to seek out support in areas that I need.
Okay.
I've always been an advocate for that. I just ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
And then I go pick people's brain and I try to listen and learn. And I've always done a lot of reading.
Okay.
Ever since I left Buffalo, being in a corporate environment, there's a lot of training and development that goes along. So then that kind of fed into it.
Okay.
And by being in the school that I was in, I always sought additional training while I
Okay.
was in school. Like there
Oh,
was always something new I was trying to learn. So I haven't really changed much from that. I'm a lifelong learner, I guess. So sometimes I think I may have had mentors that I've never met.
okay. Right.
Right.
Yes.
So, and actually, like after I knew I was getting divorced, I went to a 14-week divorce training, like how to be divorced.
Really? I have never heard of such a thing.
I did that, Julia.
Okay.
Hmm.
That's good
Hmm.
though, because I don't think if you haven't been divorced, you may not realize it's almost like when somebody dies. And
Yes.
how do you deal with that? And how do you
It
deal
was a,
with that with
it was
children?
a,
And
right. It was a
yeah.
14-week program and I went every Thursday.
Wow. Okay.
And it's like, I did that because I knew I was so wounded and I did
Yeah.
not want to, um, carry that with me.
Okay.
Because I've always had, like, I think the most important thing is forgiveness
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that we should give anyone that much power over our lives, you know? And even if they really harm us,
Yeah.
you're not going to forget. It's like somebody stub your toe, you know? You're not going to forget that I'm going to move my toe next time you walk by because I know you stepped on it
Yes.
once, but I'm going to forgive.
Yeah.
And I've always been that kind of person. And
Okay.
I think that has gotten me through so much because my children's father, my first husband, he did die.
Oh wow.
And even in his abuse and even during the separation, even, you know, his lack of support for me and the girls, and
Mhm.
even in his death, I've always tried to find the gifts and the things that he did bring because
Okay.
I just couldn't hold on to what the negatives were. I kind of put those in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And I even forgave the people at the job,
At the school. Okay.
at the school.
Yeah.
And that was because I know that, you know, it doesn't help me. I forgave them even when I was still in pain
Right. Right.
because I just had to keep getting up every single day. And it was very hard.
Yeah, I was
Now,
gonna say,
don't get me
how does a person do that? It's almost like opposite. It feels like two poles pulling from each other.
right.
You know?
And I think a lot of it has to do with pushing through even when you don't want to.
Okay.
Because I think I have had a lot of traumatic events that have happened to people around me.
Okay.
And I know that life is not a dress rehearsal. And I've always said that. I say that all the time.
Hmm.
We don't get it back. I believe in making memories wherever you go, you know,
Nice.
taking a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
Because if you don't write it or if you don't capture it, to me, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So before I went, you know, I think a lot of times, you know, we grow up and we don't, and it's no one's fault. I'm not blaming anyone,
Yeah.
but we don't necessarily hear the things that we need to hear.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of things I say to myself all the time is you're smart, you're brilliant, you're beautiful, even though you don't like all the pounds you've gained, but you're still
Mm.
so sexy and so beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
I say that to myself constantly because I can't wait for someone else to say it.
That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't wait for someone to see my brilliance
Yeah.
because it has taken me a while to get here. So to my younger self, I would tell her that all the time and not wait for anyone to tell you that, right?
Yeah.
I would say that because the people around you can be very damaging and then they don't even know that they are being damaging
Mm-hmm.
only because they can only give you what they know.
Yes. And sometimes they can only give you what they have for themselves, and they don't have that where they're telling
Hmm.
themselves, you
Right.
know?
And I would say that what I have learned um, is that I don't look to people to try to take me places that they've never been.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So I don't look to people to take me places where they've never been. Yeah. Oh, I
Hmm.
like that one.
Right.
That's a
Because
big one.
how
Yeah.
yeah, because how can you do that?
Yeah.
All you're gonna do is just you're gonna redirect your fears and your insecurities on me.
Yeah.
And I learned that when I moved to DC,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because I realized at that point, I was pretty much the only person in my family who had just picked up and left.
Yeah.
Like, who does that?
Yeah.
But it's that little voice. And there's been a lot of affirmations that have supported that. Now that I know what I know now at 55, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't let people limit the power you have over your own life.
Yeah.
Because it's your life.
Yeah.
And you have to live an authentic life.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I had to learn this even in the abusive marriage. I did every kind of like therapy thing because I didn't know what was wrong, right?
Okay.
So I went to AA, NA, ACOA, ACOA is adult children with
Yeah.
alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to the AA meeting. And not that he was an alcoholic. He didn't even drink.
Yeah.
But I was like, something's
Something's
wrong here.
wrong.
And so when I say God speaks to you, like one day I was sitting on the couch and I'm like, God, you just have to help me.
Mm-hmm.
You have to help me. So then I went on the internet and I started researching and finding things.
Okay.
And so when you do that, you just have to know that you have to sometimes dig deep inside to get up.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're saying, right? Get up, know that this is not a dress rehearsal. And the point that I was making is that before I went back to school for education, I didn't really believe I was smart enough because I had that 8 year of high school being in that traumatic environment.
Yeah.
And then being in high school, being the only person of color in all my economics classes, being the only female, right? Not getting good grades because I was just so disconnected from the major, right?
Right.
And then being in that high school when I'm being ridiculed and going through that every single day. So that's like an 8 year window. So it's hard to reflect back that you were smart, right? So I had a cousin who, and actually dedicated my master's to him. He died at 32. But before he died, he was like, you are so smart. You can go back to school to be a teacher. I'm like, you think so? He was like, girl, please. You need to enroll the night. Like, girl, just do it.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And then I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
But even in that, every day I have to get up and say, you can do it.
Yeah.
You're smart. Even though I'm getting straight A's, you're still not thinking you're smart. Like, really?
Yeah. Yeah. What is that? Yeah.
What is that
happens
about?
to
Right?
us. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's almost like
So,
that. There's some little voice or little person trying to drag you back down.
and you know what?
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because I read this book called Outwitting the Devil.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
I feel like I have. Okay.
By Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
Now, that was a life-changing book that I read. And that had to do with listening to your voice and really pushing down that other voice that say you can't, right? And the book kind of highlights how very few people really live the purposeful life that they're supposed to live.
Okay.
Because they push that little voice down because of fear. Because fear and faith cannot dwell in the same place, right? Yeah. But because of fear, because we listen to other people, we kind of say, oh, well, it's safe for me to go here.
Yes. So
I'm going to go the safe route because that's what I'm going to do. And they say very few people live that life because they operate in the realm of fear.
Yes, I believe that wholeheartedly. Yeah.
And when he wrote that book so long ago.
Yeah.
But he didn't publish it because he thought that they would admit him to the insane asylum.
Okay.
Because he was talking about what the devil can actually do in the realm of purpose and your life. And so you have to really seek out, like I said, I have mentors maybe I've never met because I usually do that through books.
Okay.
And through authors. And another book that I really would recommend that changed my life was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Okay.
And I read that at a young, in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I just recommend that book because actually it teaches you how to begin with the end in mind. Right? Okay. So you have to look into where you want to be. Yeah. And it may not necessarily be the way that you want it to be. Like I knew I wanted to get a PhD. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but never in a million years that I think that I would be a college professor right now,
Yeah.
teaching teachers.
Take it to a whole nother level. Yeah.
Only God can do that.
Yeah.
You know, he takes your pain and turns it into purpose.
Yes. Yes. I love that because both of those books sound like it really gears you toward your purpose. And that's
They
what we're
really
here
do.
for. Yeah.
Yep, we're
Think that's
here.
what we all have, some purpose, but we're all tripping over that voice that you talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like Maya Angelou, I could teach her in one of my classes. And, you know, she talks about a lot of the struggles she has had. And she always thought about whenever she had to do anything, she thought about all those people that supported her. And even if you don't have people that you can actually name, that you personally know, that's why you have to read, and you have to introduce you to people who've gone through things like Maya Angelou. Like this woman had went through so much, and then she ends up, you know, reading her poetry, you know, for presidents, never knowing her backstory, right? Yeah. So she's saying whenever she did anything, she just had all those people around her, and I think that's what we have to do. Yeah. We have to find people. Like some of my students don't have those people. They're first generation college students, and they may be challenged in life, and they just maybe really don't see a way out. But if you look to history and you create and you find these people who may mentor you through their life and their work, then sometimes you have to picture yourself and have those people in the room around you. So you have to create a support system, even if you don't necessarily have one. But you do that through meeting people, through reading and history. Okay. Because we as a people have been so resilient over the last 400 years, and we continue to be, but we have to find mentors in any way that we can. You may not necessarily have them, real life ones, but you can make them, create them. Yes. Through literature and just reading.
I love that. Yes. Yeah. So we know that you're winding down your PhD. So tell us what's next. What's the next step? Because your life is still on stage. So what's next for you?
Well, I'm still trying to be a better version of myself. Okay. Right? I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm still afraid, right? I still have that fear that I have to keep pushing down, because once you pass your comp exams, now you have to do your dissertation work, right? Okay. And so now that's a whole level of insecurity, because now you have to do the work, do the research. You did the classroom work. And so I think about it, you know, I always would tell my students, so, you know, going to kindergarten, you're just like so afraid because it's new. Yeah. And then you go to high school and you're so afraid because it's new. Then you go to college and you're so afraid because it's new. So I have to say that to myself. Well, you know, you got in this PhD program and you were so afraid because it's new. And now you're going to work on your dissertation and you're so afraid because it's new. Yeah. But you've trusted God and he's never failed you. So you're going to do great. But I have to tell myself that every day. Yeah. I have to self-reflect. I have to keep pushing, you know, keep believing God, trusting him. And so what I want to do now is I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I like teaching teachers, but I want to teach the teachers that teach the teachers. Oh, okay. So that's teaching professors.
That's a whole nother level. Okay.
Right. Because I was an economics major, I do plan a lot. Okay. And I over plan. Okay. So I was doing the math. I was like, okay, if I teach, you know, 3 sections of a class, that's 20 teachers per semester, right? That's like 60 people that I touch. And then if they have a career of 20 years, how many students, if I'm pouring into them, diversity, equity, inclusion, decolonizing the classroom, you know, white privilege, how to be a culturally competent educator. How many students does that impact over the years? Yeah. Then my daughter says, Mom, yeah, but there's a lot of universities and you really should think about teaching those professors that are teaching the teachers, and then you can reach more students.
Okay. Your daughter's challenging you, giving you,
She's challenging me. Oh, no, Mom, you can't just stay in the classroom. You have to teach the teachers to teach the teachers. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I'm working on my consulting firm. I'm working on some other projects
Okay.
because I do think I still love this education thing. I never get enough. I'm grateful for the program. My PhD will be in leadership and policy.
Okay.
So I know a lot more about how to affect real change.
Okay.
It's not just by education, but we have to really change policy.
Yeah.
And like what's happening in New York with actually having mental health people call on those calls.
Yeah.
So that's like a policy change.
Yeah.
So in order for us to really move forward with this abruptness of everything that's happening, we have to go with the momentum. And so I do want to be part of that change because I do a lot of work with Maya Angelou with my students. And she says, you just want to leave the world better than where you found it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'm on that with you. Yes.
Let's just, because we know what the world looks like and we know that we can't change the whole, everything about it.
Yeah.
But one of the shows that I watch, even about parenting, like, how your parents did the best they could.
Yeah.
And your parents did the best that they could do. And now you did the best that you could. And you're hoping that your children will do a better job than you, right?
Yes.
So eventually we'll have perfect parents.
Yes.
Eventually.
Yes.
Right?
I know. I don't know how many generations down we have to go, but okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And someone had asked me, how long do you think it would be before we would see a real change? And I wasn't being negative, but I said, really, we need about another three generations.
Okay.
I would say. So that's my grandchildren's grandchildren.
Okay. But it'll come.
But we have to keep moving forward in order for that to happen. It's not going to be perfect right now, like it wasn't perfect for our parents or our grandparents, but we have to keep moving forward. And I just want to be that little pebble. When you skip rocks?
Yes.
And sometimes you can skip, and like I'm pretty good at skipping rocks. Like sometimes I can hit 4 or 5 or 6.
Okay.
But if I hit one and make that ripple, I think that would be great.
Yeah. Then you've done a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So I have one random question to ask you because this is my life question. Why do you think evil spreads faster than love, or do you even think that's true?
Oh, absolutely. I do think that's true.
Okay. And why?
I think it's true because so many people don't have love.
Okay.
They haven't felt love. They don't know what love looks like.
Okay.
Like real love, like unconditional love, right? The way Jesus loved us, right? Some people, they don't even think that exists.
Yeah.
So if you don't know that exists, how can you spread that?
Okay.
So what you spread is what you know. And there's a lot of evil, a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. And that's what a lot of people are comfortable with. So when a person is filled with joy and love, it's like foreign for a lot of people. And they say bad news travels fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like to look at it, like people don't go around saying something is great. They just kind of go along with it and kind of expect that. And you're like, okay, that's just great. But when something is bad, they're going to make sure you know.
Yeah.
Because people are more comfortable, and I shouldn't say all people, but a lot of people are.
Yeah.
A lot of people are. But yes, I do think it spreads faster.
Okay.
But that's why we have to keep doing the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
So we can empower people so that when they do have or see love, they don't run away from it.
Okay.
They embrace it and they try to help other people to be the best version of themselves, like what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
These type of platforms are really important. Social media has its place. And, the book by, was it Dr. Dwayne Dwyer, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Mind?
Okay.
Is another good book.
Okay.
He basically uses, he talks about how we think. So, and I think what's important is that when you have to control your surroundings, you have to control your environment. So when you feel that there's somebody that's negative or evil, it's okay to separate from that.
Yeah.
Unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy people. You don't have to be around toxicity. You don't have to be around that. You can choose to do. We can choose that. And even if you know that you have to go into a situation that's like that, because sometimes that could be your family.
Yeah.
You can learn how to not engage with it.
Yeah. That's a skill. Because
It takes time.
you can get pulled right into the drama. Yeah.
And sometimes you can just be observing. You could just be like, when you could just like kind of ease yourself out, like on Clubhouse where it says leave quietly. You could just
Mm-hmm.
leave quietly because you don't have to be heard. And sometimes it's okay not to engage. And
Yeah.
sometimes, we do have those environments where we can actually see that is not really who we are and what we want for ourselves. So I could just say you don't have to engage.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you're weak.
Right.
It just means that that's not where you're trying to expend your energy.
Yeah.
It does take a skill, though. But I do think that evil is there. But we have to be able to discern that. And we have to stay in a positive headspace. And we have to control that by the people that we are around, the surroundings, the music we listen to, the words we read, the words we allow in our spirit. And we have to control that.
Everything we feed our minds with.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And television. I had a lesson with my students and I was just teaching them that we're all part of the same system, the structure that we're around. So we have to learn to get knowledge for ourselves and don't allow other people just to share with us what they want us to know.
Yeah.
Right. So we can control that evil space.
Yes.
And sometimes the evil space could be right in between our ears. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. That's the one you got to attack. Like you were saying, attack that one every day.
Every day you have to say, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. Because it's definitely, we're not done. And I always say, if you have breath in your body, I need to be better today than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's what, we try to do, because we definitely aren't going to be perfect.
No, you're not going to ever meet a perfect person. And if you meet a perfect person, they're lying to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just think that you really have to manifest things into existence. And sometimes things may be just a little delayed, but you have to definitely put out those fires of doubt.
Yeah.
Those little sparks that come up.
Yeah.
We have to step on them, pour water on them.
Yeah.
Definitely don't put oxygen on them.
No. Don't feed it. Yeah.
Don't feed it.
So you've given us 3 books so far. I don't know if there was another one you wanted to share that you would suggest everyone to read.
I could give you a lot of books, but so let me look at my bookshelf. Oh,
oh goodness! I'm sorry I asked.
Girl, I'm in my office. I'm like, yes. I think this is a good one. The adult version of this, The 5 Languages of Love.
Oh yes, yeah.
But this is the one for children.
Yes.
But I think
that's a very good one. You find out about yourself. Why, when somebody does something, say, I'm not a gifts kind of person. So when you give me big gifts or cars or whatever, it's like, okay, that's nice. But do you love me? It's sort of like, that's great. But do you really love me? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think when you read that book and you understand what the 5 languages of love, like you give people permission to be who they are, right?
Yes.
Because that's really important. Not asking people to be something that they're not capable of being, right?
Yeah.
And then I think you can leave people where they are sometimes, and that's okay. Because even with friends that I have, I accept them for who they are, and then I just don't expect them to be anything that they're not, right?
Yeah.
So then even in your relationships with your loved ones, if you know that they're a gift giver, you said, you know what, you really like giving me gifts.
Yeah.
And you recognize that they are a gift giver.
Yeah.
And you can say, that's what you like. That's how you want to love me. But let me just tell you what I need.
Yeah.
And when you do that, I think when you can have a conversation, because you're not saying it's right or wrong.
Right.
It's just different than what I need, because we can't help what we need.
Right. Yes.
And then we have to be willing to love people the way they need to be
They
loved.
need to be loved. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was a good eye opener
Yeah.
for me.
So tell us one thing that you can't not do every day.
I think being grateful for my health, being so appreciative. I mean, I think your cousin told me that. Her mother told her that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Without your health,
Yeah.
nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Getting up every day, thanking God for my health and my
Yeah.
strength, because nothing else, no matter what else, who else we love, what we love, it doesn't matter if you're not healthy.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I thank God for every day.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
That's
And
a
just
good one.
loving
Yeah.
and loving love. That's one thing I
Okay.
do love.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
because you're newly married and you're just in the sweet
No,
spot.
not that kind of love.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
Love, period. Like,
Okay.
no, even when I wasn't married, I still love love. And
Okay.
no matter, because I love making people happy, like smiles. And even if I'm loving someone by making a meal for them,
Okay.
like I just love love. So I feel like every day I just have to show somebody that I love them.
Wow. Okay. That's powerful. I just have to ask, where did it come from?
You know,
Just a life of challenges. You got to a point where you realized you want to give what you'd like to get, or
I think because I had so much love in my life, even though it hasn't been
okay.
perfect.
Okay.
I have, well, like I said, I had both my grandparents,
Yeah.
right, in proximity of me, like most of my grandparents and my grandmothers.
Okay.
And then I had a godmother that was the most giving human being you could imagine. Like when you have a godmother who does not miss one of your events, as long as and she was like I said, my mother was 19 when she had me. So my godmother was just so like mature and so giving. And I just have never met anyone as giving as her. She was my godmother, my Aunt Vivian, and just how she poured so much love into me and then into my children.
Yeah.
And then always saying, like, she was so, and so at her funeral when she died, I spoke and I said, I think that would be the person who taught me how to love more than anybody, unconditionally.
Okay.
She and my grandmother, I think those were the two people. But at her funeral, when I spoke, I said, raise your hand if Aunt Vivian made you feel like she loved you more than anybody in the world. And everybody raised their hand.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she would be the person. And then my grandma, Emma, she has had 10 children. And I never heard her say a bad word about anybody. Like, I don't care what you did, how you did it.
Yeah.
She just loved us all. Like, she had 100 and something grandchildren. And I don't care if you were having a baby and you weren't married, she would just celebrate you.
Yeah.
Like, she just had so much love. And I think I spent so much time with her that I just knew how, and she never worked outside the home.
Okay.
I don't know what education level she had. I don't know if it was, I don't know. I know it wasn't high school. It probably wasn't 8th grade.
Yeah.
I just have had some really amazing women that poured into me. And I just always felt like people didn't have them, they missed out on life.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like my heart is just pretty big. I really wanted a lot more children, so I couldn't have any more children. So I went and got a classroom full of them.
Yes.
And I kept doing that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So I just, I think that's where I get that from, is because just so much was poured into me.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure people smile or give them something to look forward to, because life can be really hard.
Yes. For so many people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we are working women and we're so busy, we can still give it and spread it as we go.
Mm-hmm.
We're
And I
touching
think
so many
maybe
people.
that's probably why I like education
Yeah. Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
It just allows me to be, a continuous version of giving back.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from them, from
Yeah.
my students.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And one more question is, how do individuals get in touch with you after this podcast is over?
They can actually message me I'm Shellonnee Chinn Whitehead on Facebook,
Okay.
and they can message me, send me a message that way.
Okay.
I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to be because I
Okay.
am in school.
Yes.
And I don't do a lot of social media
Okay.
because I've been in school for 2 years,
Yeah.
and I'm getting ready to write this dissertation. So I'll check my Facebook every now and then.
So you'll be even less available in the next year or so. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. But
I'm
it's
looking
all going to
forward
be
to it.
worth it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping my work will change the world a little bit, like that
That's
ripple.
what I was going to say. Getting ready to change the world. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your life and sharing your lessons and what you learned. I know a lot of people
I
are going
hope
to.
I've been a helpful to someone else, and I really appreciate you for inviting me here, Julia.
Yes. Thank you.
And tell everyone I said hi, especially your mom.
I will. Yes.
You've been listening to the F50 Woman Podcast. Join the F50 Woman movement and this diverse group of voices to help change the world one woman at a time. Why should you join at your age? Because we're not done yet.